Commish, at first, though, I absolutely have to ask, as I welcome you to the show and thank you for coming on, I have to ask, how is retirement?
Well, it's good. There's a lot of paperwork involved in recapturing all the many email addresses that you don't have anymore because you have a new computer and you don't have your same email address. So I try to run down 2 or 3 or 4 of those every day, and it's a process. I mean, many days I feel like I've worked harder than when I was working.
I never thought about that, but when I left the Post-Dispatch, of course I lost my Post-Dispatch email, which is, of course. I mean, I knew that. But, now that you mention that, there were a lot of emails I just had, in the system that I was using as a Post-Dispatch employee. And, and then one day you're like, well, wait a minute. I don't have these anymore, So, no, you're right. You're absolutely right. So good luck with that, man. Good luck.
Well, thanks, man.
Well, let's work let's go back to the beginning in terms of like the Cardinals and the fact that, we haven't gotten your opinion, and I'm looking forward to it on some of the things they've done or not done. But let's start with the big move, of course, Wilson Contreras as their catcher, 5-year deal. And he seems determined to catch more than he had been. He just seems determined to improve some of the things that he has improved on, but probably needs to improve a little more. And he genuinely seems really fired up about playing here. So I'm assuming you liked the move, but, how much did you like it?
Well, I liked it in that they didn't have to give up any players to get him. They were able to keep some of their young talent, some of which is still unproven, and some of which has been had a couple of decent years and have been disappointing lately. So they still have all those people in tow right now. I like Contreras. I think they've changed their philosophy on what a catcher should be in the St. Louis Cardinals system since Matheny and Molina the last 20-plus years. They were the only ones they had, and they value offense more. Not that Molina didn't have some good offensive years, but not many of them were lately. And value offense more and defense a little less. And Contreras is not a butcher back there. He's okay. And I'd like to see him hit second myself and have maybe Brendan Donovan hit fifth behind Arenado. He's not a power hitter, but he's a contact hitter. He doesn't strike out much. And if you walk Arenado and maybe have Goldschmidt on base too, Donovan will get him in.
That's really interesting you said that because – I can't remember. I think it was FanGraphs. Roster Resources, which is at FanGraphs, which is really valuable because you can see at any given time kind of each team's depth chart, their projected lineup and everything else. It's really good. In their projected lineup, I guess they were taking a stab at it. They had Contreras second, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, and I like that you're thinking that too, because I hadn't thought about it much. I was thinking about him as a number 5 hitter, but that bat will play just about anywhere you want to put it. I think it's a really good bat.
Well, he's hit first and second for the Cubs. It isn't like he hasn't been up there before. I'd lead off with, let's say, Nootbaar or Donovan, one or the other, and have the other one hit fifth. I'd like to have a left-handed hitter behind Arenado. Mainly, and then you can come in with some of the other. And I don't trust Carlson to be that guy just yet, unless he hits better left-handed.
Right. Rick Hummel with us. Let's since we're talking about Contreras, let's get to a related transaction. That was a big one. That 3-way deal between the A's and the Braves, and then the Brewers kind of come out of that as the big winner, which no one saw coming. But there's been a lot of criticism of the A's and them not getting enough for parting with Sean Murphy. But what did you make of that rather busy and complicated and somewhat bewildering transaction?
Well, it's unusual to have Atlanta Braves having 2 regular catchers now, in Travis d'Arnaud and of course Murphy. And they say one of them is going to maybe DH. Well, what happens? Actually going to play Ozuna in the field then? I thought he was the DH. So. I don't know that the Braves seem overloaded at that spot. That didn't seem to be a position of need for them. Their need is to sign Dansby Swanson or get a shortstop. As far as Oakland, I don't know about the haul they got back. It doesn't seem as if it's enough, but I'm not familiar with enough. And the Brewers ended up with William Contreras, who's not as accomplished a catcher as Wilson Contreras, his brother, but he can hit, he can play outfield, he can DH, and he might help the Brewers a little bit, who now have lost Omar Narvaez, who was a free agent, to the Mets. The Mets have like 4 catchers now. What are they doing?
Yeah, good point. I hadn't thought about that either. So it's been an unusual offseason with I don't think – listen, we knew that there were going to be players getting – a select group of players are going to be getting a ton of money. But even then, I think their overall haul was much larger than anybody anticipated. And what do you make of this rather dramatic and spontaneous escalation in contract size and contract length and average annual value, all these monster deals we've seen so far?
Well, I was asking myself before we went on the show here, how many MVPs Carlos Correa and Trey Turner, for that matter, have won, and I believe the answer is 0.
That's right.
Turner has been a really good player for the Dodgers and the Nationals. Correa has been a good player, I would say. I don't know about really. He was really good a couple times. He wasn't a really good player for the Minnesota Twins this past year. And there have been some seasons with Houston where he was not a really good player. There have been several seasons in Houston when he was not their best player, maybe all of them in Houston when he was not their best player. And yet, here he is getting a 13-year contract.
Turner was on that 19 team, though, right, with the Nationals?
He was.
I think, yeah.
So
there's a couple of them. But
I left out Xander Bogaerts, who has no MVPs either, I don't believe.
That's right. That's right. And I get that. I really do. But on the other hand, I mean, I can understand in this market, listen, these owners have plenty of money to spend. They really do. It doesn't mean that they're going to spend it wisely, but it's there. I'm surprised if I was surprised more than anything that's happened this offseason, it's that, Texas gave Jacob deGrom $185 million, and then the Yankees, invested a 6-year deal with Carlos Rodon, who last year was the first year in a long time where he had what you would call a full season, And I what are the chances that he holds up well during the life of that contract? He's had a lot of injuries.
Not very good. If I was the Jose Quintana, I'd be looking for a new agent, I think. That contract he got was nothing. He had a pretty good year.
He really did, because he pitched so well with Pittsburgh before the Cardinals got him. Well, let me ask you about that, or just a related question. Are you surprised that the Cardinals haven't done anything else, at least at this point?
Maybe a little, but there's – what is this, December 16th? There's still time.
Sure.
I don't think if they were going to acquire a pitcher that they were going to acquire another Quintana type, though. I think they were looking for somebody better than that. He's not really – even though as good as he pitched for the Cardinals over the last 2 months, he's not an ace. He's not a staff ace. They've got some other guys that are as good as he is. You probably don't need one more guy like that. You need one more guy that's better than that. And Rodon certainly is better than that. But do you give him $162 million to be better than that? I would have to say no, given his history of injuries and just pitchers' injuries history in general. But there may be a way to trade for somebody that you like. I can't tell you who that name is right now.
Right.
And they have plenty of good pitchers. But they have very few great ones.
I agree with you. I think it's going to have to come via trade, and they certainly have the resources to do that. So it'll be interesting to see. I would imagine, unless they really got an itch during spring training or something, I would imagine they would just kind of wait for the season to play out a little bit before maybe taking a splurge at trying to acquire.
I agree. They got money to, they'll have money to play, and people don't want to hear that they're not going to spend any more. 35 or whatever. Well,
right.
Maybe that's a better approach to take. Let's see what Dakota Hudson looks like. Maybe he's going to be pretty good this year. I don't know. He might be.
He's got a chance to just bring a little more to it. Second year back from Tommy John.
Yeah.
He's obviously got the arm, So yeah, the new pitching coach, we'll see if he can get to him. I don't, he's a wild card factor, no pun intended. I wanted to ask you about this, and I'm not saying this to promote something that I wrote, but I'm doing these reports about just more extensive reports, like on each player's season and what it might tell us about.
Yes.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I'm very flattered. What it might tell us about 2023, and I wrote about. And I want to talk about him, too, on the show here, Jack Flaherty, because Jack Flaherty might be the most important guy in that spring training camp and the most important guy to open the season, because if he can stay healthy and do his thing and get close, reasonably close to the form he had in 2019, that rotation would look a heck of a lot different. My thing, Commission, this is the question for you. I don't know how much confidence to have in that. I'd like to have a lot. I'd like to see him really have a strong year. He's been through so much. I mean, it's just been nuts what's happened to him the last couple of years. I don't know where the confidence level should be. So why don't you take a stab at it?
Well, first of all, he might not be the most. He is the most important guy in their pitching situation. Now, his free agent year is coming up next year, so ordinarily, guys who are in that spot really crank it up. And I would expect him to do that given good health. And I think he had good health at the end of last season. He was not good enough health maybe to pitch, more than, or he didn't pitch any innings in the playoffs actually, but he wasn't targeted to pitch more than 3 or 4 anyhow. But that's the guy. And if they could have him be what he was in the second half of 19 and the first half of 21, right there. Yes,
that's right.
That's a pretty good pitcher. It's a really good pitcher, and maybe Jordan Montgomery's first 2 months of his time with the Cardinals are more emblematic of his ability than his last month. We don't know that. We've only seen him for 3 months, so there's things there. I like Steven Matz a lot. I think he's going to be a very quality guy, and Miklasz I like too, but I don't like any of them as an ace except for Flaherty.
I've actually mentioned you several times because we had a conversation, I think, on the air where you kind of very politely told me to, like, hold on now, that type of thing. That's a commishism, by the way. He'll do that. Anyway, yeah. No, he'll do that. It's polite, but he's like, well, hold on now. When I was talking about their lack of a strikeout punch in that rotation, and you pointed out that Steven Matz actually has a pretty good strikeout punch, and you're right. So I would expect him to do well this year too, health permitting.
I think that's going to be a good sign for them. We'll have 3 more years to find this out, of course. But that's a guy people don't talk much about because, well, the people here didn't see much of him. He had some really good games and some really awful games, and then in his last start, he had both. He was setting the Reds down. Now, this wasn't the 75 Reds he was pitching against, but he had something like 5 straight strikeouts. Then he hurt his knee covering first base, and that was it.
Yeah, that was so weird. It was a shame. It really was. So last year he was in 15 games, 10 starts. The ERA is misleading, but if you go with a fancy pants stat, it indicates that he also had some really bad luck last year. Like if you go with that fielding independent ERA, I always look at that. I don't swear by it, but I look at it because it does indicate whether a guy sort of got a fair shake. Maybe he deserved a better outcome. Well, his fielding independent ERA last year was 3.78, which was a lot lower than his 5.25 ERA. So I think there's a lot there. I really do. And let me go down here since we're talking about this so people don't think we're nuts. Well, they know you're not nuts. I am, of course. He had a 26% strikeout rate last year, which is pretty good, man. You don't see a lot of starters, many of them above that. I mean, there's some, of course, but 26%, especially on this staff, is really good.
Well, a number of years ago, he was ranked as high as DeGrom was with the Mets. Now,
I didn't know that.
It's pointless to say that he's as high as him now, but before DeGrom won his a couple Cy Youngs out of that, the Mets was going to be their big star of the future, and he had some good years for them, albeit pocked with injuries. And he had a nice year with Toronto in 21. think he was 13-8, something like that. And I'm fully confident that he'll be a good, solid number 3 guy, maybe a 2 guy. If they can get one more top of the line pitcher, I'd be okay with that. Although I don't think this Graceffo is too far away.
No, and he could loom prominently at the outset in their bullpen. That's the other thing about him. He can definitely help you there first, kind of a stop along the way to being in the rotation at some point. That'd be good stuff as well. I'm excited to see him. Hey, Commish, what would your anticipation be with Miles Michaelis? Like, let's say, providing that he gets healthy, or he stays healthy, my bad. He stays healthy and he's throwing the ball well and all systems go and all that. Would your anticipation be the Cardinals try to sign him maybe late in spring training, some point during the season, rather than let him get to free agency? And, of course, he has a say in that matter. But what's your read of that situation?
Well, I think he's already indicated the desire to stay. And you wouldn't want to give – he's not going to get 5 or 6 years. You could get him for 3, I think. And since
unless Steve Cohn wants him, yeah,
that's true. It plays into his hands. I mean, he grew up in Jupiter. They train in Jupiter. He doesn't have to leave home for 6 weeks every spring. I mean, I know St. Lucie's not that far away either, but Jupiter's right there, and he loves the Cardinals, and they love him. And I see him winning 15 games this year. And then, but will they do it before the season starts? They could, because it's not going to be one of those deals that sends you scratching your head. It's not going to be $160 million for 6 years. It might be, I don't know. It could be 70 for 4 or 60 for 3 or something like that. 65
right.
for 3, 70 for 3, something like that. Nothing $30 or $40 million a year.
He's a good pitcher. He really is, and especially if you have a Flaherty who fits the number 1 mold. If he can get back to that level, having Michaelis as your number 2 is pretty good. It really is. Okay, we talked about that. Let's go to the bullpen real quick. And the great Rick Hummel is with us here on 590 The Fan KFNS. All right, do you think they could use another proven guy down there? I think the bullpen's maybe got a little underlying shakiness. I'd like to see it, but what about you?
They need a proven left-hander for sure. I'd like to think Cabrera could come back and be the, hard-to-hit guy he was the 2 previous seasons to this, and even part of this season before he just lost it. He got hurt, and then he lost it. And I don't think Thompson is that guy. Some of their guys get left-handers out anyway. Gallegos is pretty good against left-handers, so is Helsley. Palante has been very good against left-handers. I wouldn't mind seeing him start, actually, but they seem to have a glut there so far, so he'll probably start to open the season in the bullpen. They could use one of those, crafty left-handers that are always available in spring training. they're at least always used to be available in spring training. I think they can hold off on that and see what other teams are doing, trying to let guys go. They don't want to pay them or whatever, and the Cardinals can swoop in and get somebody there. Maybe to be as good as they were hoping Andrew Miller would be. And Andrew Miller was good for maybe one of the years he was here. The other 2 years, not as much. But he had one good year here.
Commish, and I'm not even trying to make a joke about this, although I do joke about it quite a bit, making fun of Drew Verhagen and how that turned out. But let's put that aside, my snarkiness aside. When he was healthy, which was not you had to look quick when he was healthy because he didn't stay healthy very long. But you also saw him in spring training. Do you think he's got good stuff? In other words, do you think he could be, best case scenario, kind of a surprise in a good way in 2023?
I do. His stuff is better than 2/3 of the guys on the staff. Now, can he stay healthy enough to use it? Well, he's had a couple, injuries last year that cost him a lot of time, and sometimes his pitch selection isn't real good, but sometimes he's unhittable. And the Cardinals were not the only team that was chasing after him before last season. It isn't like they just plucked him out of the woodwork somewhere. The other teams wanted him too. Now, have we seen what they paid for? No, but they didn't pay all that much for him. He's got a 2-year deal at not a whole lot of money. And if he can be a right-handed guy in the bullpen, a spot starter, he he had a bunch of wins. He was in the right place at the right time for some of those wins, but some of those wins he earned. And I don't think there's any reason to give up on him if he's healthy.
Yeah, I've really laid it on thick. I think because I like to say Verhagen, so I think that's the reason why, more than his actual pitching. But no, listen, if he's healthy, it'll be interesting to see what he can do because I think there is some talent there. And you are right. I'm trying to be serious about this rather than making fun of it. He did have a lot of interest stateside, so we'll see. We'll see. It's going to be. They have a few guys like that where if they go the other way, as in a more positive track, then their pitching staff looks better. I got to ask you this, and I'm gonna apologize in advance for a long-winded question, but if you look at the Cardinals' offense, they do have a guy that can bat fifth or second or whatever, and I think they've got enough people that they can rotate into the DH spot to where. They can fill the void of Pujols retiring. Now, I'm not saying they fill it along the lines of a 550 slugging percentage or whatever, but they have enough guys that if they get the matchups and Marmol does his thing, and he also uses Arenado as a DH, Goldie as a DH, maybe a little bit of Contreras. I think they'll come out well at DH. So. And they're committed to their outfielders that we all know about, plus Walker will be part of the mix. The question is, as I finally get to it, is that, I always say, I think we all say, well, they need another bat. They need this. They need that. They're pretty crowded. If they're going to go with what they have, and they're determined to do that, they're pretty crowded, so I'm not sure exactly who they should pursue, who's out there. And I'm talking about more like a free agent type. But do you have any thoughts on that? Do you see an obvious fit that would really help the team, an obvious fit as in a practical fit that is feasible and all that good stuff?
Well, if Conforto had played, for the last year and a half, you might say his name. But I go back to Gorman and Carlson. There was a time when those two guys were the top two prospects in your system as left-handed hitters. Now, Carlson's a switch hitter, but Gorman only left-handed. I don't think we've seen enough of those guys to throw them off. I think if they're healthy, and Gorman was healthy last year, Carlson was not a couple different times. I mean, Gorman, he had a terrible average year, but he hit 30 home runs counting AAA and the big leagues. That's still 30 home runs no matter where you hit them. And Carlson was a good player for them at the end of this previous season when they went to the playoffs. When they had that big winning streak, Carlson was one of the big guys on the club then.
That's right.
I think there's a lot to like on both those guys, and I don't think you could find too many guys better than them to bring in, especially at what these guys make, which is nothing.
And I think that you and I are on the same wavelength. I stick up for Dylan Carlson, even though it was exasperating to watch him and frustrating to an extent, but he did have a legitimate excuse. I mean, this was not, a bunch of us in the Cardinals spinning it. I mean, the guy was legitimately hurt, and you tear a ligament in your thumb or whatever it was. I think it was that. Right. I mean, how are you going to hit the ball hard? How are you going to hit it with authority? I mean, so now that said, he's under a lot of pressure to come through because people like you and I will support him as far as like, hey, let's not get carried away. The guy was hurt last year. But that said, now he's going to have to get it done. And I'm also an optimist about Tyler O'Neill now that he's finally doing what he should have been doing a while back, which is to work on his flexibility and become more nimble and not be so tight with his musculature and be able to run without pulling something all the time. I think that should help him. And if he can stay on the field, I mean, we saw what he could do. So I'm a little more optimistic about their offense than maybe some folks are, and I know that a lot of fans are restless about it. I'm not criticizing them. I understand it because you don't have necessarily proven some of the things they would need to happen are guys that aren't so-called proven guys, proven in a consistent manner. But I was looking at something yesterday with Gorman, and I'm with you. Gorman really bothers me, like. This feeling that's sort of out there, it's like, well, yeah, you can trade him. And left-handed power bats are slowly, I don't know why, but they're slowly disappearing from baseball. They're hard to find. He's got immense power, and while his strikeout rate was not what you want, it was pretty close to Kyle Schwarber's strikeout rate. My point is, you live with the strikeouts if a left-handed bat, can hit for a lot of power. It is a worthy, sensible trade-off.
I agree. Now, early on, I think I'd like to see Donovan hit 5. I want a left-hander 5, and maybe have O'Neill 6 and Gorman 7, Carlson 8, Edmund 9, something like that, with Yepes in there as a DH maybe for Gorman sometimes. But I think it's a pretty good lineup if those guys are playing to – they don't have to have their best years. We're not even sure what Gorman's best year is yet. But Carlson could be as good as he was a couple years ago. O'Neill could be, 2/3 as good as he was a couple years ago. You hit him 6. You don't have to have him hitting 5th. You don't hit all those right-handers in a row. You don't want to have Contreras, Goldschmidt, O'Neill in a row. That doesn't make any sense. If you got one left-handed guy, that's going to be. It should be Gorman eventually. That's what they planned all along here, and maybe that will come to fruition sometime during the season. But for the start of the season, I would have Donovan hit there because he's going to hit the ball somewhere if they walk Arenado.
Right. Commish, I think that's all I got for you, pal, unless there's something that you wanted to throw in there that I didn't ask you about. No,
I was just thinking about those numbers for those shortstops. What is Dansby Swanson and his agent thinking now? He's thinking, well, I'm better than these guys. Maybe not Turner, but he's better than Bogarts and Correa at this stage of his career. He's played on, a World Series winner and a team that went deep in the playoffs last year. I don't know. And where does he end up? I mean, I hope he ends up with the Braves. I'd like Judge staying with the Yankees. That was the big move of the offseason for me. He belongs with the Yankees, and he's with them.
Yeah, he does.
Swanson belongs with the Braves. He grew up in Atlanta, for Pete's sake.
Maybe the Cubs make their move with Swanson. I know there's been a lot of pressure in the media and fan base that's what they're kind of hollering for, because the Cubs have been rather quiet this offseason. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, Bellinger was a nice pickup, and Taillon's he's a solid enough guy. But they haven't done a lot. The Dodgers have not done a lot. The Red Sox, surprisingly, have not done a lot. So there seems to be some places where Swanson is, in fact, a fit. Maybe Minnesota is one of those places, too, now. So I don't know where he'll go, but there's certainly some places where you can just identify the need. And the teams I mentioned, Cubs, Dodgers, Red Sox in particular, we know they have the money. They don't want to spend it for some reason right now, but we know they have the wherewithal to do that. Well, every team does, but especially those three.
And now you have Eric Hosmer out there. You can have him for free if you want. Boston let him go, and San Diego's paying all the contracts. So if you want him, you got him. Nothing.
There you go, right? Well, yeah. We'll reconvene soon, but it's really wonderful talking to you, and I hope you and Melissa and
you and Kirsten also have a happy holiday.
We will, and give my regards to everybody.
I will,
especially Dr. Hummel.
I'll be talking to him in a few days. Yes.
Yeah, tell him I said hello, and
I'll do that.
And I'm telling him that you got to tell him that I'm going to be rooting for Michigan. So in the playoff, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't have anything against TCU, but Michigan's. I would like to see the better teams play in the final. I'd rather see Michigan and Ohio State or Michigan and Georgia or whoever,
Yeah, I really enjoy watching TCU, and that'll be a fun game. But I have a soft spot for Michigan because of Dan Dierdorf, and then also I like Harbaugh. I don't know him personally, but I've always really just enjoyed watching him coach. And also, and I mean this, I know Doc Hummel. He is a doctor, in fact, at what is that called? Is it like the University of Michigan Hospital System, or what? He
does the University of Michigan. He's on the faculty there. And he also runs the cardiology unit at the VA hospital in Ann Arbor, which he spends about as much time doing that as he does at UM. But he had to be kind of weaned onto Michigan. He's an Illinois grad, and even when Illinois plays Michigan, he's all decked out in orange and blue, But otherwise, he's okay with the Wolverines.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. I wonder how much. Well, first of all, their quarterback, they didn't have that element in last year's playoff. I mean, This McCarthy kid's pretty damn good. He can win a game, He really is. He can definitely win a game. And I know they don't have their number one running back, but their number two running back looked great himself.
He was pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if they have the pass rush that they need, but it's going to be fun to watch that game. And, I'm looking forward to, seeing if Georgia can be upset. Because Georgia, for a really great team, and they had several uncomfortably close games this year. So that tells me that their motivation level at the time may have had something to do with that. But I don't think and I'm not doing a hot take thing here, Commish, I swear to you. I don't think Georgia is as invincible as they are perceived, They're great, no. Don't get me wrong, but I think they can be had.
I do appreciate the fact that those two games of which you speak, all the players who are supposed to be playing in those games will be playing in those games. They're not opting out. They're not in the transfer portal. They're not going to start working out for the pros. All these other games, I mean, my favorite game is Cincinnati and Louisville tomorrow. Because
That's right.
one coach of one has already signed to coach the other, and he's not going to coach either team in the game.
Oh, man. I didn't realize that. That's good stuff.
The guy from Cincinnati is going to Louisville. I mean, the guy from Louisville going to Cincinnati because Jeff Brown's going from Purdue to Louisville. So the guy is coach Louisville, and then he's going to Cincinnati. But you know what? I'm just going to watch it.
What, he doesn't think it's like a fair thing to do, ethical thing to do? Coach against the team he just left? Yeah. Hey, imagine that. Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Well, Commish, I love you, pal. We'll talk soon. And
thanks, man.
Looking forward to it. Looking forward to it the next time. Take care, man.
I am too. Thank you.
Merry Christmas. Thank you.
You too.
That's our really good friend Rick Hummel here. I love talking to that guy. It's just awesome. But to fill in case I was rambling and didn't explain it, Dr. Hummel, who's on the staff at Michigan, is Rick Hummel's oldest child, only son, but oldest child. And through the years, I did not spend as much time with Rick's other children. It's just simply because Doc Hummel was older, and he was more able to just kind of freely move around and go to Chicago when the Cardinals were playing the Cubs to hang with his dad, and I would hang along too. And his son's one of the best guys I've ever met. I mean, he's just a great, great guy. So I can't root against Michigan with Doc Hummel on that faculty. I just can't do it, even though he is an Illini guy. But then again, my friend Will Leach is an Illini guy to the death, except, he's also at every Georgia home game and doing a Georgia podcast. So
yes.
The fandom is it's interesting how fandom works, and I'm like that too, I got to admit.